Naomi's waiting for Seven in her cargo bay. It's time for their weekly Codiscot game, but Seven wants to reschedule. She's upgrading her regeneration alcove with a cortical processing subunit, saying it's a piece of tech for downloading data into drones. Does this mean Seven's planning on absorbing new information Matrix style? Sounds like that's exactly her plan. Rather than read the paperwork that everybody else has to, she'll instead stick it straight into her brain, and she can do that while she's recharging to boot. The benefits of Borg brainial implants, I guess. Naomi leaves her after a little prompting, and Seven begins her system update. Seven awakes and immediately calls B'Elanna, who was asleep, to say there's something important to discuss. They arrive together on the bridge where B'Elanna, in a manner that suggests she's not entirely impressed, asks Janeway for permission to shut down sensors based on the opinion of Seven. See, Seven's absorbed all of the ship's reports for the last few months and thinks it's infested with photonic fleas. She leads us through the frankly dubious train of logic whereby some bugs were brought on board with a shipment of spice for Neelix and got into the mess hall replicator because Kim was working on it. This affects the power supply to sensors because reasons, and she was able to correlate that against random sensor faults because other reasons. Tuvok calls it logical, which I think is pretty fucking generous of him, though isn't convinced of the accuracy. So we go to find out, in a Jeffries tube, which isn't the replicator in the mess hall. They must have flown through the network as we find the fleas and their extended family. If Janeway's concerned about an infestation that eats power and can travel through wires, she doesn't show it, instead saying that we should rehouse the bugs. You'd think she'd be more worried after what happened in Macrocosm. Before we went flea hunting, we detected some strange science wibblies a few light-years away and changed course to take a look. The source is whatever the fuck this thing is. We're called by a guy who tells us we might want to put our shields up because his gizmo's a bit temperamental currently. Sounds important, so let's pop a name on the lad. His new name will be...
It's me, fucking Toddy!
Suggested by Lieutenant Joshua Adams. Toddy's warning was well-founded, and Voyager does a bit of shaking after sticking up shields. He says there's a problem with the power supply for the fancy gizmo he's building, the one that can throw ships across vast areas of space in an instant. We've invited him onto Voyager before you can say potential shortcut home. By a curious coincidence, he's looking to get back home too, though in his case, the cause was an unstable wormhole rather than a banjo-strumming prick. That's why he's built this catapult, as the alternative was a 10-year flight. Unfortunately, his first test, while successful, buggered the power core, which is why it's misbehaving. We offered a visit with our own tech people, but Toddy says it'll be too dangerous for them. He's willing to let us have a go at fixing it remotely, though, and B'Elanna thinks she has an idea. He has no way of paying us, but after hearing of our own story, says he's fine with us using the catapult once he's gone. It's not powerful enough to send us all the way home, but 1,000 light-years is nothing to be sniffed at, and Janeway accepts the offer. Seven seems to think it's an idea worth exploring too, as during her nightly recharge, she's downloading data on the catapult into her brainial implants. The overnight cogitation has provided another conclusion. Seven thinks Toddy is full of shit. She says the oopsie yesterday when we arrived threw out a certain type of science wibbly, the same type caused by the tech that pulled Voyager into the Delta Quadrant 5 years back. You know, the one that made ships travel over vast areas of space in an instant. Janeway couples that data to Toddy's hesitation in allowing people onto the catapult. For safety reasons, he said, but it could also be to hide the same type of power source used in the caretaker array. It's enough to warrant some further investigation, which is why Toddy is being given a once-over by the doc to make sure he's not a caretaker and hasn't been around one. He passes the test, so Janeway instead wants to know why he's tried to hide the fancy power source in the catapult. The answer is in the question. It's fancy. That shit wasn't cheap, and there are plenty of people in the Delta Quadrant who would be fine with taking it off his hands, cold and dead or otherwise. It's plausible enough, so in the absence of any proof, she's willing to continue their arrangement. But that doesn't mean she's letting it go either, and she wants Seven to keep digging. So dig she does, all the way back to the original caretaker array. After all, that's the one place we know for a fact had these power supplies. The logs from Voyager seem to suggest nothing was left, certainly nothing big enough to be a power source. But there is an anomaly on the visual record of the explosion, and Seven thinks it looks like a tractor beam. The computer can't confirm what it is or the origin, but the bit of the station she's currently zoomed in on was a reactor, meaning it had one of those very rare power supplies in it. If the computer doesn't have the required data, let's talk to the people who were there. Tuvok tells her he was the one who farted fireworks at the array, and who calculated how much kaboom would be needed to do the job. Seven notes that the power he chose was twice that required based on scans of the array, a choice he says was to ensure the Kazon wouldn't find anything salvageable. But Seven believes a kaboom of that power could also bugger up subspace, causing one of those power supplies to enter it, if it was pushed in by a tractor beam. Of course, that would require a ship to be next to several large kabooms, and one that didn't appear on sensors too, as there's no record. Tuvok's unconvinced and tells her as much. Without evidence to test it against, her guess will remain just that. As we're in the realm of wild speculation, let's go and see the expert. Seven wants more data on the caretaker array, and is willing to stretch the definition of data to include what comes out of Neelix's face. He's all too happy to share his opinions, despite admitting that he deliberately stayed out of the caretaker's way. A sound strategy in the circumstances, but not a great basis for obtaining facts. Seven shares her belief that there was a secret ship at the array when it kaboomed, and one that was there specifically to save the rare power supply. It's just the sort of random dart-throwing that Neelix loves, and he hops right on board. He's also willing to share the data from the sensors of his ship, the one that we've had sitting in the shuttle bay for several years, a point to whoever remembered that it exists. Just like Tasha Yar, Seven returns to her bed with data in hand, and prepares for plugging in. Toddy's getting ready for his maybe flight, maybe death. The catapult is working, probably, and we're going to give it a try. Toddy calls to thank us and wave goodbye, before the catapult grabs hold of his ship and lives up to its name. We'll know in an hour or two if he's done a dead. While we wait, Seven calls Chakotay to astrometrics. He's got nothing better to do, and hasn't had for quite a few seasons now, so he goes to find out what she wants. Whatever it is, it's serious enough to lock the doors and turn off the cameras. An incredulous Chakotay learns that Seven thinks there's a conspiracy on board, which shouldn't be that surprising given the title of the episode. Seven now believes that Voyager isn't here by accident, the whole thing having been planned in a joint Federation Cardigan top-secret operation. See, based on Neelix's data, a Cardigan ship appeared a week before Voyager, only to be sent back to the Alpha Quadrant. That's not unusual, as the caretaker did this to a number of species, but what if the Cardigans were actually there to organise a foothold in the Delta Quadrant, and were secretly working with the caretaker? Janeway and Tuvok were both in on it, with Tuvok being the one to guide Chakotay to the place where they were grabbed by the caretaker. Janeway followed shortly after, and armed with a pair of fireworks that wouldn't normally be on a Federation ship. Fireworks powerful enough to open a tear in subspace through which a power supply could be pushed, and then relayed to right here where a catapult was planned. Not to send us home, but rather to bring more ships here and start the real Federation Cardigan invasion of the Delta Quadrant. We don't learn what the caretaker was getting out of this, or why he's happy with the plan resulting in his death and the destruction of the array, but these are mere details. As is the rather meandering route that led us here, featuring shortcuts that they had absolutely no way of predicting, in order to fulfill the time frame of this plan. Unless we're suggesting Toddy was willing to wait here for a couple of decades anyway. It's complete bollocks, and just like many conspiracies, the sparse fragments of plausibility are enough to make some people ignore the mountain of easily disprovable bullshit that they're buried in. Chakotay isn't entirely sold on the idea, but it's left him cautious enough to listen when Seven says he should prevent Janeway from using the catapult, at least until they figure this thing out. That's assuming it worked, of course, and it looks like it did. Toddy gives us a call to tell us he's alive and 5,000 light-years away. Before signing off, he bequeaths his catapult to us. Janeway's delighted and wants us to prepare the catapult for use. Personally, I'd hang around for a while and figure out how it works, but that's just me. We're going through after running a test or two, and that's the end of it. Unless Chakotay does something to prevent it, anyway. He enlists B'Elanna to do the actual sabotage despite her skepticism, a minor fucky that'll take things offline for about 6 hours. And his suspicion is enough to dismiss Kim when he comes to help. He's Federation, after all. The fracture deepens. Seven's been hoovering up more information, and now it's Janeway's turn to be called to astrometrics. Seven's had a chance to absorb more data, and that proves beyond a doubt that the catapult is a plot to restart the Marquis and launch raids against the Federation. Chakotay's in on it, obviously, having learned about the caretaker array from the Cardigan ship we saw earlier. It was destroyed by the Marquis, you see, something she didn't know about before. And Tuvok must be a part of this too, because he made those kabooms powerful enough to do subspace bollocks. It's the only explanation, because this is definitely 100% accurate. What's that? Where did the Marquis get a cloaked ship to do the tractor beam thing? Shut up. Janeway's not buying it and tells Seven she's mistaken, causing Seven to reel off a list of things that tie into her belief, as long as you don't look at them too hard, anyway. It's all enough to make you a touch jumpy, which is certainly how Seven's acting when she walks down a corridor. It's easy to figure out which faction most of these people are working for, but Naomi's a harder one to calculate. She's half Qatarian and they were Marquis sympathizers, but Ensign Mum's Federation. Naomi could be working for either of them. Best to not engage with her at all, it's too risky. A power wibbly from Seven's cargo bay brings Janeway down to investigate, and it looks like Chakotay had the same thought. He's also had the same thought that being armed for a while might not be a bad idea, though, to be fair, Janeway might just be taking one of her pet guns for a walk. They dance around the distrust between them before Chakotay is the first to come out and say it. The accusations are all very similar to the ones Janeway was told, and, after comparing notes, they realise they've been acting like a pair of arseholes. No time for recriminations, though, as the Delta Flyer just took off. I see we've still not locked those fucking doors, then. Seven's flying it, obviously, and Voyager follows, while Chakotay orders the doc to take a look at those upgrades Seven made to her alcove. We move to the bridge, though not before Chakotay stops somewhere to get rid of his gun. Janeway's still got hers, I see. Maybe this one needs long walks. Anywho, we learn Seven's heading for the catapult. All the usual options for stopping her aren't working, and she's even buggered up the aim of our guns, too. The doc calls to tell Janeway the problem isn't with the alcove, but rather that Seven has tried to inject too much data into her brainial implants and can't fit it together properly. As we can't stop or shoot her, I suppose we should try going over there and talking to her. Janeway teleports over for a little chat, and before you ask, we couldn't grab Seven because science reasons. Seven's got it all figured out now. There wasn't a plan to invade the Delta Quadrant or restart the Marquis. No, the real objective was her. That's why the Federation sent her parents to investigate the Borg and get assimilated. I mean, okay, that's not actually what happened, and the Federation tried to call them back, but what's more convincing than doing the exact opposite of the thing you really wanted to happen, eh? Fiendish. And all of this is so that Voyager can take her back to the Alpha Quadrant and dissect her and learn how they can fight the Borg. I mean, okay, the Federation is already responsible for fucking up no fewer than 2 Borg queens, and without breaking much of a sweat, but maybe those were flukes. Janeway tries reasoning with her, explaining that the alcove upgrade may have been working properly, but she's not the drone she used to be, and all of this is her trying to process too much data. An appeal to trust her meets with more success, and I'll give a point here for the callback, as that's the line Seven used in Relativity last season. Seven lowers the force field that was keeping Janeway back, and they teleport over to Voyager. We'll assume they towed the Delta Flyer back aboard afterwards. We've given that catapult a go, and to everybody's delight, it didn't summon an invasion fleet or a Marquis attack. Even better, it took another 3 years off the journey, meaning our total is now...
Bollocks!
Naomi visits Seven in astrometrics to report on her homework and ask why Seven was dismantling the upgrades to her alcove. Seven's decided that fully understanding a moderate amount of information is more reliable than plugging a million random data points together. She's also decided that it's time for their delayed game of Codiscard. Janeway and Chakotay are back on friendly terms too, though you wouldn't think it based on the stingy portion of coffee she pours. Maybe she started drinking ristretto to conserve resources. We leave them to joke about poisoning each other, a job usually reserved for Neelix, as we fly away. The appeal of conspiracies has interested me for a while. On the surface, they're generally obvious horseshit to anybody who's willing to step back and check them against actual data. Their proponents will say that A is true because B, which is true because C, which is true because A. Circular logic. Arguments to form the walls of a house, but without the foundation of empirical proof to base them upon. They start to collapse in the lightest breeze, which is why the people living in them have to spend all their time patching the holes with ever more elaborate materials, while telling themselves that the breeze is a lie made up by big wind. I used to work with a gentleman who subscribed to a number of conspiracy cults. I refuse to call them theories because if you argue that your ideas are following the science, then we should be using the scientific definition of the word theory, and such ideas do not stand up to objective scrutiny. Anyway, I think he saw me as some sort of prize. If he could convince me of his beliefs, then they must be true. No matter how many of those trains of illogic I derailed, he'd have another waiting. If I spent a day batting away 99 different proposals and walked away in exhaustion at the 100th, the previous attempts would be forgotten by him in favour of the perceived victory. The ability to immediately isolate any discrepancy from the things he'd just been connecting it to was impressive in its own way, a kind of immune system against the infection that facts would bring. I'd suggest he'd taken some sort of vaccine against critical thinking, but obviously he didn't believe in those. I may not have agreed with his thoughts, but I did understand why he thought them. The appeal of conspiracies is undeniable. Cockends who offer to teach you secret mysteries are a great shortcut to actual learning. Why spend years and thousands of pounds educating yourself on physics and astronomy when Jeremy Fucklumps can explain why the world is flat in 3 hours for just 40 quid? Both of them will leave you with the feeling that you know more than most, but Jeremy's lecture comes with a pie and a pint during the interval. Absolute fucking bargain. All of which is to say it's easy to be seduced by such thinking. We might look at this episode and question why the crew would choose to entertain such thoughts, but being stranded is probably the single defining moment of their lives, one that carries strong emotions. We all know what the Vulcans say about emotion and logic, right? And why would Seven entertain those? Because she's so certain of her infallibility and she has all the arguments. After all, A was true because B, which was true because C, which was true because A. Flawless. Flawless. As a story, it's sufficiently entertaining to overlook the somewhat clunky writing in places. I've wanted a bit more conflict between the original two crews since the show started, and this gives us an idea of how that might have played out. And at the end, we're still left with the question of why Voyager was carrying 2, and only 2, of those special fireworks Tuvok used. Who knows, maybe he was working with a Ferengi arms dealer all along. End of episode.
Right, that's it. I'm calling an halt to the holodeck idea. It's too complicated, and those dickheads in the vents keep buggering things up. We need something simpler to kill Paris.
Airlock?
When does he go near airlocks? Wait a minute, have we even got airlocks?
Yes, but it's cheaper to film people using the teleporter. That way we don't have to build a new set.
Hold on. So we'd have to build a whole new set to kill him in an airlock?
Yes.
And you don't think that'll arouse any suspicion from the crew?
I doubt it. We didn't even have a real shuttle bay until season 6. Woof.